Supreme Commander Jalthar stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Glory, and watched the holographic display with satisfaction. 10,000 warships stretched across space in perfect formation. Each vessel represented the finest military technology the Valkorian Empire could produce. Each crew had trained for years. Each captain had sworn to bring honor to the Empire. The fleet had traveled for 3 months to reach this location. A thin line marked on the star charts, the Terran border zone. Jalthar had studied the reports about humanity. They were a young species, only 400 years in space. They occupied 12 star systems. Those systems contained rare elements that the Empire needed. Elements that would fuel Valkorian expansion for the next century. The humans had drawn a line and told the galaxy not to cross it. Such arrogance from such a small species amused Jalthar. His empire controlled 40% of the known galaxy. The Valkorians had conquered 17 different species in the last 200 years. What were humans compared to that? "Sir, we are receiving a transmission from the human vessels," his communication officer announced. Jalthar looked at the tactical display. 47 human ships waited on the other side of the border. 47 against 10,000. The human commander must be insane to think those numbers meant anything. "Put it through," Jalthar ordered. The holographic display shifted. A human woman appeared. She wore a simple gray uniform with minimal decorations. Her dark hair was pulled back severely. Her face showed no emotion. The nameplate on her uniform read Admiral Chen. "This is Admiral Chen of Terran Command," she said. Her voice was calm and flat. "You are approaching the Terran border zone. Turn your fleet around and return to Valkorian space." Several officers on Jalthar's bridge laughed. The Supreme Commander raised his hand for silence. He studied the human admiral. She did not look afraid. She did not look angry. She simply looked certain. "Admiral Chen," Jalthar replied, keeping his voice diplomatic. "The Valkorian Empire has claimed the systems beyond your border. We require the resources in those systems. Your species occupies space that could benefit the greater galactic community." "Those systems are Terran territory," Chen said, "recognized by the Galactic Council Treaty of 2387. You have no claim to them." Jalthar's tentacles twitched in irritation. "The Galactic Council has no authority over the Valkorian Empire. We stopped recognizing their treaties 20 years ago. Your species is isolated and weak. You have no allies. No one will come to help you." "We don't need help," Chen said simply. "Admiral, look at your display," Jalthar said, gesturing to his own tactical screen. 10,000 ships against 47. The mathematics are simple. The Valkorian Empire is willing to be generous. Surrender the 12 systems peacefully. Your people can evacuate. No one needs to die. Chen's expression did not change. "Supreme Commander Jalthar, let me be very clear. Turn back. Cross this border and you cross into consequences you cannot comprehend. This is not a negotiation. This is not a threat. This is a statement of fact." Something in her tone made Jalthar pause. He had negotiated with dozens of species before. He knew the sound of fear disguised as bravado. He knew the desperate bluffing of the weak. This was neither. Admiral Chen spoke the way someone might comment on the weather. Calm. Factual, certain. "Admiral, are you truly willing to sacrifice 47 ships and thousands of lives for pride?" Jalthar asked. "Pride has nothing to do with it," Chen replied. "The border is the border. You have 48 hours to withdraw. If you cross the border, Terran Command will respond. You have been warned." The transmission ended. Admiral Chen's image vanished from the display. Jalthar's primary tactical officer, Commander Relthas, turned to him. "Sir, shall we prepare for combat?" "Scan their ships again," Jalthar ordered. "Full spectrum analysis. I want to know everything about their capabilities." The scanning teams worked for 3 hours. They analyzed energy signatures, weapon configurations, shield strength, and hull composition. The reports came back consistent with previous intelligence. Human ships were well designed, but not revolutionary. Their weapons were powerful, but not overwhelming. Their shields were strong, but not impenetrable. "Sir, the analysis shows their vessels are indeed formidable for their size," Relthas reported. "But even optimistic projections show they could not damage more than 400 of our ships before being destroyed. We have the overwhelming advantage." Jalthar reviewed the data himself. The numbers supported the conclusion. 10,000 against 47. Even if each human ship fought brilliantly, the mathematics were cruel and absolute. Yet something nagged at him. Admiral Chen's certainty, the complete absence of fear or desperation. Perhaps they have weapons we haven't detected, suggested his science officer. We have scanned across every known spectrum, Relthas said. There are no hidden weapons, no cloaked vessels nearby, no defense platforms in range, just 47 ships. Jalthar considered his options. He could withdraw, report to the Imperial Council that humanity seemed unusually confident, and recommend further intelligence gathering. But such a recommendation would be seen as cowardice. The Council had sent him with explicit orders. Secure the systems. Show the galaxy that the Valkorian Empire was the dominant power. If he withdrew without even trying, his career would end. Worse, the Empire would look weak. Other species would think they could draw arbitrary lines and the mighty Valkorians would simply accept them. Send a message to the Imperial Council, Jalthar decided. Inform them we are proceeding with the operation. We will secure the border systems within 1 week. 48 hours passed. Admiral Chen sent one more transmission. The same message. The same calm, emotionless tone. Turn back. This is your final warning. Jalthar did not bother to respond. He gave the order. All ships advance, combat formation Theta 7, cross the border and proceed to the first target system. Engage any resistance with full force. The Valkorian Armada moved forward. 10,000 ships crossing an invisible line in space. Sensors tracked the human vessels carefully. Weapons locked on. Shields reached maximum strength. Every crew member prepared for battle. The 47 human ships did something unexpected. They retreated. Not just pulling back. Not just repositioning. They turned and fled at maximum speed, disappearing into the depths of human territory. The Valkorian bridge erupted in cheers. Officers congratulated each other. They had won without firing a shot. Humanity had looked at the Armada and chose survival over pride. Exactly as Jalthar had predicted. They run like cowards, Relthas declared triumphantly. The great human defense was nothing but empty words. Jalthar should have felt victorious. Instead, he felt a growing unease. He remembered Admiral Chen's face, her absolute certainty. People who bluffed looked different when their bluff was called. They looked angry or desperate or relieved to escape. Chen had looked exactly the same. Calm, certain, as if everything was proceeding exactly as planned. Maintain combat formation, Jalthar ordered quietly. Maximum sensor range. Watch for anything unusual. Sir, they have retreated, Relthas said. Should we not pursue and maintain formation? Jalthar repeated, his voice sharp. Something is wrong, but the Armada was already across the border. Already 15 light years into human territory. And behind them, far away in Terran Command Headquarters, Admiral Chen watched her display and pressed a single button. Throughout human space, thousands of systems activated. Systems that had waited patiently for decades. Systems designed for exactly this moment. The trap was set. The prey had entered. And soon the Valkorian Empire would learn why humanity had drawn that border, and why they had been so certain about defending it. Captain Vexlar commanded one of the outer perimeter ships of the Valkorian Armada. His vessel, the Swift Retribution, held position at the edge of the formation. For 6 days, the fleet had advanced into human territory. For 6 days, they had encountered nothing. No resistance. No human ships. Nothing but empty space. The celebrations from the first day had faded. Now the crews spoke in quieter voices. The absence of humanity felt wrong. It felt deliberate. Sir, we are approaching the asteroid field designated on the charts as Formation Delta 9, his navigator reported. Vexlar looked at the display, a standard asteroid field. Thousands of rocks ranging from small boulders to planetoids several kilometers across. The fleet would need to navigate around it or go through carefully. Nothing unusual. Maintain course, Vexlar ordered. Stay alert. His scanning officer suddenly stiffened. Sir, I'm detecting unusual energy signatures from the asteroid field. Very faint. Almost like they're trying to mask their presence. Specify, Vexlar demanded. I can't identify the source. The readings keep shifting. It's as if the asteroids themselves are... The officer stopped. His face went pale. Sir, the asteroids are moving. Deliberately. In formation. Vexlar stared at the tactical display. The officer was correct. What appeared to be random space rocks were adjusting their positions, slowly, subtly, creating a pattern, creating a corridor that the fleet was already entering. Alert the flagship immediately, Vexillar snapped. All ships emergency stop. Reverse thrust. But momentum carried ships forward. 300 vessels had already entered the asteroid field. And then the asteroids revealed what they truly were. The rocks split apart, not breaking but opening, like flowers blooming in fast motion. Inside each rock was a mechanical core, weapons, engines, computers. The asteroids weren't asteroids at all. They were mines. Human mines. And they had been waiting here for years, maybe decades. Shields to maximum. Vexillar shouted. The mines attacked, not with simple explosions. These weapons did something far worse. Energy beams lanced out, striking Valkorian shields. The shields flickered, held for a moment. Then the beams passed straight through them, as if the shields weren't even there. Impossible, his weapons officer screamed. Nothing can phase through our shields like that. The beams struck hulls. Ships exploded. Not external detonations, internal ones. The weapons were somehow getting inside the vessels and detonating from within. 300 ships became 300 balls of fire in the span of 5 minutes. Vexillar watched in horror as ships around him died. The swift retribution shook as multiple beams struck it. Alarms blared, hull breaches on 7 decks. The shields had done nothing. Nothing at all. Evasive maneuvers, Vexillar ordered. Get us out of this field! His ship turned, engines screaming. Other survivors did the same. They fled the asteroid field in panic. Behind them, the mines stopped firing. They simply went dormant again, returning to their patient wait, ready for the next group of ships. On the flagship, Supreme Commander Jalthar received the reports with growing dread. 300 ships lost, not in battle, not even in a fair fight, simply deleted. The humans had ceded their territory with autonomous weapons that ignored shields. How is it possible? Relthus asked, his voice shaking. Our shields are rated to stop anything up to Theta-class penetration weapons. These beams went through them like they didn't exist. The science officer pulled up data from the few sensor recordings that survived. Sir, I believe the weapons use some form of quantum phase technology. They temporarily shift the beam out of normal space-time, allowing it to bypass shields, then shift it back inside the target vessel. That level of technology should be impossible for such a young species, Jalthar said. Perhaps they are not as young as we thought, the science officer replied quietly. More reports came in. Scouting parties sent to nearby systems found them completely evacuated. Every human civilian had left. Every space station had been abandoned. The worlds themselves showed signs of recent habitation, but were now empty. As if humanity had known this was coming and had moved everyone to safety. Sir, we are detecting strange objects throughout the region, the sensor officer reported. Thousands of small buoys. They are emitting low-frequency signals. Analyze them, Jalthar ordered. The analysis took 2 hours. The buoys were doing nothing aggressive. They simply broadcasted signals. Signals that mapped the position of every Valkorian ship. The humans knew exactly where every vessel in the Armada was located, at all times. The buoys had probably been deployed the moment the fleet crossed the border. Jalthar began to understand. The 47 ships that had retreated were never meant to fight. They were there to confirm the fleet would cross the border. Once the crossing happened, the real defense activated, automated, prepared, waiting. We need to withdraw, Jalthar said. Sir? Relthus looked shocked. We have barely lost 3% of our forces. We still outnumber any possible human fleet by numbers that don't matter if we can't fight back. Jalthar interrupted. Send orders to all ships. We will regroup and plan a new approach. Begin withdrawal to... Every display on the flagship bridge suddenly went white. Not broken, not damaged. Taken over. A transmission was being forced through every communication system in the fleet. Admiral Chen's face appeared on every screen. Supreme Commander Jalthar, she said, her voice still perfectly calm. You were warned. You chose not to listen. What you are experiencing is not war. War implies two sides fighting. This is pest control. How dare you? Relthus shouted at the screen. Chen continued as if she hadn't heard him. For 15 years, Terran intelligence has monitored your empire. We have studied your tactics. We have analyzed your technology. We have prepared for this exact scenario. You are not fighting a desperate defense. You are fighting a species that has spent decades preparing to kill you efficiently. The transmission shifted. The display now showed deep space, empty space, or what appeared to be empty space. Then one by one ships appeared. They hadn't jumped in. They had been there all along, cloaked, invisible, hundreds of ships. Then thousands more. You thought 47 ships was our defense fleet, Chen said. Those were observers. This is our defense fleet. The display counted the ships. 4,700. 47,000 human vessels materialized from nothing, each one larger than the Valkorian standard warship, each one bristling with weapons that the scanners couldn't fully identify. Jalthar felt his blood turn cold. They had been led into a trap. Not a simple ambush, a calculated, prepared, meticulously planned trap. The kind of trap that required years of preparation. The kind of trap that demonstrated not just military power but military thinking, far beyond what the Valkorians possessed. You are now surrounded, Chen said. Your ships are being tracked by 70,000 autonomous targeting systems. You are in range of 600 weapon platforms. Every missile in your arsenal has been pre-calculated into our defensive algorithms. You cannot run. You cannot hide. You can surrender or you can die. Those are your only options. The transmission ended. Admiral Chen's face vanished. The displays returned to normal tactical readouts. But now those readouts showed the truth. The Valkorian Armada was no longer the hunter. They were not even the hunted. They were specimens in a jar, surrounded, trapped, waiting to see if the jar would be opened or simply sealed forever. Sir, what are your orders? Relthus asked, his voice barely a whisper. Jalthar looked at his fleet. 10,000 ships. No, 9,700 now. Against 4,700 human vessels that had appeared from nowhere. Against automated weapons that ignored shields. Against a species that had been ready for this fight for 15 years. Admiral Chen had not been bluffing. She had not been posturing. She had been stating facts. Simple, terrible facts. The border was not a line drawn in hope. It was a line drawn in absolute certainty. And the Valkorians had crossed it. Prepare the fleet for battle, Jalthar said quietly, and pray to whatever gods you believe in that we survive long enough to retreat. Around them, in the vast darkness of space, human weapons systems activated. The battle was about to begin, but it would not be the glorious combat the Valkorians had imagined. It would be a lesson. A painful, brutal lesson in why humanity had drawn that border, and why they had been so very certain about defending it. The human warship Relentless Guardian hung in space like a predator waiting to strike. Commander Sarah Morrison stood on the bridge, watching the tactical display with professional detachment. She had trained for this scenario 17 times in simulations. Now it was real. All weapon systems green, her tactical officer reported. Targeting solutions locked on assigned vessels. AI combat systems ready. Morrison nodded. Around her ship, 4,700 other human vessels maintained perfect formation. Not the loose, flexible formations the Valkorians used. Tight, calculated positions where every ship's weapons could support every other ship. Where overlapping fields of fire created kill zones with no escape. Maintain position, Morrison ordered. Wait for the command. 300 years ago, Earth had nearly destroyed itself. Nuclear weapons, biological warfare. Conflicts that killed billions. Humanity had learned lessons in that fire. Terrible lessons. Lessons that other species had never needed to learn because they had never been quite so good at killing their own kind. The lesson was simple. Never fight fair. Never fight with honor. Never fight to show your strength. Fight to win. Fight to end it. Fight so brutally and so completely that no one ever wants to fight you again. The Terran military was built on that philosophy. Every ship in the fleet was designed not for glory, but for absolute effectiveness. Redundant systems backed up by more redundant systems. If the main computer failed, 3 backup computers took over. If weapons were damaged, secondary weapons activated. If shields fell, armor held. If armor broke, the ship's AI would keep fighting with whatever remained. Human ships didn't have the elegant curves of Valkorian vessels. They looked brutal because they were brutal. Function over form. Efficiency over elegance. Every surface designed to deflect weapons fire. Every system designed to keep fighting no matter what damage it took. Admiral Chen is broadcasting, the communications officer announced. Morrison listened as Admiral Chen explained the situation to the Valkorians. She spoke calmly, factually, the way a doctor might explain a diagnosis to a patient. No anger, no gloating, just facts. You are surrounded. You cannot win. These are your options. Do you think they'll surrender? Her executive officer asked quietly. No, Morrison said. Pride won't let them. They'll try to fight their way out first. Then when they've lost enough ships, they'll consider surrender. That seems wasteful. It is, Morrison agreed. But some lessons need to be paid for in blood before they're learned. The Valkorian fleet began to move. Their formation shifted. They were gathering their ships into a concentrated spear formation, a classic breakthrough tactic. They would aim for the weakest point in the human encirclement and try to punch through with overwhelming force. Morrison smiled slightly. They're going for Section 7. That's where we thinned our lines deliberately, the tactical officer said. Exactly. Let them come. Admiral Chen's voice came through on the command channel. All ships weapons free. Engage assigned targets. Rules of engagement Gamma, fire. The space between the two fleets erupted with light. Human ships opened fire with weapons that had been designed specifically to fight this battle. Missiles that didn't just explode on impact. They penetrated shields through the same quantum phase technology that the mines used, then detonated inside enemy ships. Energy beams that adapted their frequency mid-flight. Valkorian shields were designed to stop specific energy wavelengths. Human beams analyzed the shield frequency in microseconds and shifted to wavelengths the shields couldn't stop. Railguns that fired projectiles at relativistic speeds. Simple kinetic weapons. Chunks of metal moving at a significant percentage of light speed. No shields in the galaxy could stop raw momentum like that. The projectiles punched through Valkorian ships like bullets through paper. And the AI systems. Every human ship had an artificial intelligence running its combat systems. These AIs had been fed data on Valkorian tactics for 15 years. They knew how Valkorian captains thought. They knew how Valkorian ships moved. They predicted enemy actions before those actions happened. A Valkorian ship would begin to turn, and human weapons would already be firing at where that ship would be in 3 seconds. The enemy dodged into the attack rather than away from it. Over and over. Every evasive maneuver became a fatal mistake. The Valkorian spear formation charged toward Section 7, 2,000 ships moving in tight coordination. A battering ram of metal and firepower aimed at the thinnest part of the human line. Morrison watched them come. Section 7, execute protocol anvil. What the Valkorians thought was a weak point suddenly became the strongest. Hidden weapons platforms activated. Human ships that had appeared to be standard cruisers revealed themselves as heavy battleships with armor, 4 times thicker than expected. The thin line became a wall of steel and fire, but that wasn't the real trap. The real trap was behind the Valkorian spear. While they charged forward, human ships closed in from the sides and rear. The spear formation became a pocket, surrounded. Every Valkorian ship now had human vessels on all sides, overlapping fields of fire. Crossfire from multiple angles. No matter which way the Valkorians turned, they faced human weapons. They fired back desperately, but their targeting systems couldn't keep up, couldn't predict, couldn't adapt. Morrison watched as ship after ship on the tactical display changed from green to red. Enemy vessels dying, not from single devastating hits, from accumulated damage. Death by 1,000 cuts, efficient, calculated, merciless, sir. We're receiving a transmission from a Valkorian vessel, communications reported. Put it through. A Valkorian captain appeared on screen. His face was bruised. His uniform burned. Behind him, his bridge was in chaos. Crew members screaming. Fires burning. Alarms blaring. Why? The captain gasped. Why are our shields useless? How do you predict our movements? What are you? Morrison considered her answer carefully. For centuries, my species fought itself. We became very, very good at killing. We learned to build weapons that could end entire civilizations. Then we looked at what we had become and decided never to use those weapons. But we remembered how to build them. We remembered the tactics. We remembered the brutality. She paused. You asked what we are? We are what happens when the most self-destructive species in the galaxy decides to direct that destruction outward instead of inward. We are what happens when paranoia becomes military doctrine. We are the species that prepared for this war for 15 years before it started. The Valkorian captain stared at her. 15 years? We knew your empire would eventually come for our systems. So we prepared. We studied you. We built weapons specifically designed to defeat your technology. We created tactics specifically to counter your strategies. This isn't a battle. This is a test you were never designed to pass. The transmission cut out. The Valkorian ship exploded seconds later. Morrison felt no satisfaction, no joy. Just professional acknowledgement that the mission was proceeding as planned. By hour 3 of the battle, the Valkorians had lost 4,000 ships. The human fleet had lost 37, not because the Valkorians weren't fighting well. They were fighting desperately bravely, but they were fighting a battle that had been scripted years before. Every move they made had been anticipated. Every tactic they tried had been countered in simulations 1,000 times. Morrison received new orders. All ships begin herding protocol. Push the enemy toward Sector 447. The human fleet shifted. They stopped trying to destroy every Valkorian ship. Instead, they damaged engines, disabled weapons, forced the survivors to move in one specific direction, like shepherds with a flock, like hunters driving prey toward a prepared kill zone. The remaining Valkorian ships, now down to about 5,000, clustered together, seeking safety in numbers, moving away from the human attacks, not realizing they were being guided, being positioned. Supreme Commander Jalthar was still alive. His flagship had survived through luck and heavy armor. He watched his fleet die around him and finally understood the truth. The border wasn't humanity's limit. It was humanity's choice. They could have expanded, could have conquered, could have become an empire. Instead, they drew a line and dared anyone to cross it, not because they were weak, because they knew what they were capable of and chose to restrain it. On the relentless Guardian, Morrison received confirmation. The Valkorian fleet was now positioned exactly where Admiral Chen wanted them, in a sphere, surrounded by human ships in a perfect 3-dimensional formation, every weapon pointed inward, every targeting system locked on. "Sir, should we finish it?" the tactical officer asked. Morrison shook her head. "No, now we wait for them to surrender. Admiral Chen wants them to understand not just that they lost, but why they lost." In the center of the sphere, Supreme Commander Jalthar looked at his tactical display, looked at the human ships surrounding him, looked at the remains of his once mighty armada, and finally, he understood what Admiral Chen had been trying to tell him. Turn back. This is not a threat. This is a fact. Cross the border and face consequences you cannot comprehend. He had crossed the border. Now he comprehended the consequences, and the comprehension was more terrible than any threat could have been. Lieutenant Marcus Webb stood guard in the detention section of the Terran vessel, steadfast resolution. 3 days ago, his ship had captured a damaged Valkorian cruiser. The survivors numbered 43. They sat now in clean, well-lit cells, fed, given medical treatment, confused by their captor's behavior. One prisoner, a Valkorian engineer named Krolvan, sat at the transparent barrier of his cell. His wounds had been treated by human medics. His broken arm set properly. He stared at Webb with a mixture of fear and curiosity. "Why?" Krolvan finally asked. His translator device made his words sound mechanical but understandable. "Why what?" Webb replied. "Why treat us well? We came to conquer your people. We would have killed you all if we could. Yet you heal our wounds. You give us food and water. You speak to us without anger." Webb considered the question. He was not a philosopher. He was a soldier. But he had been thinking about this question himself for days. "Because the war is not about anger," Webb said. "It's about necessity. You invaded our space. We defended it. The fighting is done. Now you're prisoners. Treating you badly won't change anything except making us worse people. Your Admiral Chen said this is not war. She called it pest control." Webb winced. "The Admiral is very good at psychological warfare. She says things to make enemies afraid, to make them understand the situation. But she doesn't mean it the way you think." "Then what does she mean?" "She means that you never had a chance of winning. The outcome was decided before you crossed the border. We don't see you as equals in this fight, not because you're weak, but because we were too prepared." Webb paused. "That probably sounds arrogant." "It sounds honest," Krolvan said quietly. "We lost 6,000 ships in 5 days. 6,000. I saw vessels destroyed so quickly their crews didn't even have time to scream. Your weapons went through our shields as if they were made of nothing. Your tactics anticipated everything we tried. It was not a battle. It was execution." "Yes," Webb agreed. "It was. Why? Why did we fight so brutally?" Webb asked. Because we want you to never ever cross that border again. Not you personally. Your empire. We want your leaders to be so terrified of humanity that they tell their children and their children's children to stay away from Terran space. We want to become a nightmare story in your culture. The monsters beyond the border who destroy armies without mercy. Krolvan absorbed this. You want us to fear you. Yes, because fear prevents war. If your empire is afraid enough, they'll never try this again. No more fleets will die. No more soldiers on either side. Fear creates peace. That is a dark philosophy. It is, Webb acknowledged. But it works. We learned it the hard way. On the bridge of the Eternal Glory, Supreme Commander Zhalthar faced an impossible decision. Admiral Chen had made an offer. Surrender now with 40% of his fleet still intact. The survivors would be allowed to return home. No pursuit. No further attacks. The price was complete withdrawal, reparations, and a 50 light-year demilitarized zone around human territory. Or he could keep fighting. Keep watching his ships die. Keep sending crews to their deaths against an enemy that could not be beaten. Pride demanded he refuse. Honor demanded he fight to the last ship. The warrior code of the Valkorian Empire said death was preferable to surrender. But Zhalthar looked at the tactical display. Looked at the 5,000 ships left from the 10,000 he had started with. 5,000 crews depending on his decision. Sir, the Imperial Council has sent a message, his communication officer said. Zhalthar read it. The Council had been receiving his reports. Watching the fleet die in real time, they gave him authority to negotiate. Authority to surrender if necessary. They valued the ships and crews more than they valued his pride. That decision told him everything about how the Empire viewed this disaster. Open a channel to Admiral Chen, Zhalthar ordered. Chen appeared on the screen, still calm, still emotionless. She looked at him and waited. Admiral Chen, Zhalthar said, I request clarification of your surrender terms. Complete withdrawal of all Valkorian military vessels from the border zone, payment of reparations for the cost of this defensive operation, creation of a 50 light-year demilitarized zone that no Valkorian military ship may enter. Those are the terms, and if I accept, your surviving ships will be allowed to return home unmolested. We will not pursue. We will not attack. The war ends immediately. Zhalthar took a deep breath. And if I refuse? Chen's expression didn't change, but something flickered in her eyes. Something almost like disappointment. Then we destroy what remains of your fleet. Every ship. Every crew. Total annihilation. Then we enforce a 100 light-year exclusion zone. Your empire will be pushed back twice as far, and the galaxy will know that we offered mercy and you refused it. That is not mercy. That is a threat. It is both, Chen replied. Mercy would be letting you leave with no conditions. But we need to ensure this never happens again. So we add conditions. Refuse the conditions and face worse consequences. That is not cruelty. That is deterrence, Zhalthar wanted to rage. Wanted to scream at this human female who spoke of destroying his fleet as if discussing weather patterns. But rage would accomplish nothing. He was beaten. His fleet was beaten. The only question was how many of his people he could save. I accept your terms, Zhalthar said. The words tasted like poison. The Valkorian Empire surrenders, Chen nodded once. Transmit the surrender order to all your ships. Our vessels will guide yours to the border. You will have safe passage. Once you cross back into your own territory, all human ships will withdraw. This engagement is concluded. The transmission ended. Zhalthar sat in his command chair and broadcast the order. Fleet-wide surrender. Return to Valkorian space. The battle was over. Around him his officers wept. Not from fear. From shame. The mighty Valkorian Empire, conquerors of 17 species. Defeated by humans they had dismissed as young and weak. As the fleet began its retreat, guided by human vessels that maintained weapon locks but did not fire, Zhalthar reviewed the battle data. His science officer had compiled a report that made Zhalthar's blood run cold. Sir, you need to see this, the science officer said. The data showed energy output from human weapons during the battle, power consumption, system utilization. The numbers were analyzed and compared against the theoretical maximum capacity of human ships based on their reactor signatures. The human fleet had never exceeded 40% of maximum power output. 40%. They had defeated the Valkorian Armada while operating at less than half capacity. If they had wanted to, if they had truly tried to destroy every Valkorian ship, they could have done it easily. Quickly, They had held back. Not from mercy, from calculation. They destroyed enough to prove their point, enough to create fear, but not so many that the survivors couldn't return home and tell the story. The humans wanted witnesses, wanted people who had seen their power and would spread that knowledge throughout the Valkorian Empire. They were never trying to kill us all, Zhalthar whispered. They were sending a message. Sir? The science officer asked. This was a demonstration, a show of force designed to make us afraid. Everything was calculated. The number of ships they destroyed, the tactics they used, the surrender terms they offered, all of it designed to create maximum psychological impact. Zhalthar understood now. Humanity did not want to conquer the Valkorian Empire, did not want to rule them or destroy them. They wanted the Empire to be terrified, to never cross that border again, to tell other species what happened when you challenged humanity. It was brilliant. It was ruthless. It was utterly terrifying. The humans had turned warfare into a form of communication, violence as language, death as deterrence, and they had spoken their message very, very clearly. As the battered Valkorian fleet crossed back over the border into their own space, the human vessels stopped at the line. Did not pursue, did not chase. They simply watched, making sure the Valkorians understood. The border was the border. Cross it and face consequences. Stay on your side and live in peace. Zhalthar looked back at human space one last time, looked at the line on his display. Such a simple thing. An arbitrary designation on a star chart. But now it represented something more. It represented human certainty, human power, human restraint, and human warning. He had crossed that line. He had learned what it meant. And he would spend the rest of his life making sure no one from his empire ever made the same mistake. 3 months after the battle, Ambassador Lyrax of the Zethian Confederation stood in the observation deck of Terran Command Station Alpha. She was not human. Her species had been traveling the stars for 1,000 years before humans invented the radio, yet she found herself feeling very small standing next to Admiral Chen. Thank you for seeing me, Admiral, Lyrax said. Her translator made her clicking language understandable. Of course, Ambassador. Your government requested this meeting. I assumed you had questions about the Valkorian incident. Questions, concerns, fear, Lyrax said honestly. Every species in this sector of the galaxy is talking about what happened. The Valkorian Empire, which seemed unstoppable, was crushed in 5 days. Crushed by a species most of us considered young and untested. Chen nodded. I understand your concern. Do you? Admiral, 12 species have sent ambassadors to your space in the last month, all requesting non-aggression pacts, all asking for assurance that humanity has no plans to expand beyond your borders. We are afraid. You demonstrated power that we did not know existed in this region. You revealed capabilities that seem impossible for a species with only 400 years of space travel. We didn't reveal everything, Chen said quietly. Only what was necessary. Lyrax felt a chill run down her spine. There is more? There is always more, Ambassador. But let me answer your real question. Why the border? Why did we draw that line and defend it so absolutely? And why don't we expand if we have such power? Yes, those are exactly my questions. Chen turned to look out the observation window at the stars. 300 years ago, my people nearly destroyed themselves. We had created weapons that could end all life on Earth. We came within hours of using them. Nuclear arsenals aimed at every major city. Biological weapons designed to kill billions. Chemical agents that would make entire continents uninhabitable. We stopped, Chen continued. Not because we suddenly became wise. Because we scared ourselves. We looked at what we were capable of doing to each other and realized we were one bad day away from extinction. So we changed. We put rules in place. We limited ourselves. We decided that our greatest strength was also our greatest weakness and we needed to control it. Lyrax listened carefully. This history was not widely known outside human space. When we went to the stars, we brought that lesson with us, Chen said. We knew what we were. We knew that humans are very, very good at warfare. At tactics, at creating weapons, at destroying enemies. We are good at it because we practiced on ourselves for thousands of years. We got efficient at killing because we killed each other so much. So we drew the border, Chen explained. Not to keep others out, though it does that. To keep ourselves in, to remind us that we don't need to expand, don't need to conquer, don't need to prove our strength. The border is a self-imposed limit. A promise we made to ourselves and to the galaxy. You limit yourselves voluntarily? Lyrex asked, stunned. Yes, because we remember what happens when we don't. We remember the wars on Earth, the genocides, the conflicts that killed millions. We remember being the monsters. And we decided never to be those monsters again, not to others. Only to those who threaten us. Lyrex processed this. The Valkorians threatened you. They crossed the border. They ignored our warning. We defended ourselves. Chen turned to face the ambassador. But we didn't destroy them. We could have. We held back. We took only what was necessary to make our point. To create deterrence. We want them afraid, yes? But we don't want them dead. This philosophy, Lyrex said slowly, this idea of overwhelming preparation in service of peace rather than conquest, it is unlike anything I have seen in galactic history. Because most species didn't have to learn this lesson the way we did. Most species expanded outward before they developed weapons that could end their entire civilization. They fought others before they perfected the art of fighting themselves. Humans did it backward. We nearly ended ourselves first. That teaches different lessons. What if you had not drawn the border? Lyrex asked. What if humanity had decided to expand like the Valkorians? To build an empire? Chen was quiet for a long moment. Then I think the galaxy would be a much darker place. Human history shows what we're capable of when we decide conquest is acceptable. We are efficient at it. Too efficient. That's why we chose not to do it. You said you didn't reveal everything in the battle, Lyrex noted. How much more capability do you have? Enough, Chen said. Enough to defend our border against any conceivable threat. Enough to make sure no one ever successfully crosses that line. But not more than necessary. We don't build weapons for glory. We build them for function. And their function is deterrence. Lyrex made a decision. The Zethian Confederation would like to propose a formal alliance. Not military, but diplomatic. Cultural exchange. Trade agreements. We believe humanity could be a stabilizing force in this region. We would welcome that, Chen said. But understand that our borders will not change. We will not help you conquer others. We will not expand into your territories or anyone else's. We will trade. We will talk. We will share knowledge. But we stay on our side of the line. I understand. And honestly, Admiral, that is exactly why we want the alliance. Because you have power but choose not to use it for conquest. That makes you unique. And trustworthy. On Valkoria Prime, former Supreme Commander Zhalthar stood before the Imperial Council. He was no longer Supreme Commander. That title had been stripped from him, but he had been asked to speak to the Council about what he had learned. The humans are not like us, Zhalthar said. They do not think about warfare the way we do. They do not fight for honor or glory. They fight to win, to end threats, to create fear that prevents future conflicts. They are cowards then, one council member said. No, Zhalthar replied firmly. They are efficient. There is a difference. Cowards run from fights they could win. Humans avoid fights they don't need and dominate fights they choose. They chose to fight us, and they showed us exactly how badly we underestimated them. He pulled up the battle data, showed the council the numbers, the casualties, the speed of the defeat, the revelation about human power output never exceeding 40%. They were playing with us, another council member whispered in horror. Demonstrating, Zhalthar corrected, showing us what they could do while making sure we survived to tell others. This is their strategy. They don't want to conquer the galaxy. They want the galaxy to be too afraid to bother them. And it worked, the council leader said. Every species in 3 sectors is talking about the human victory. Our defeat has made humanity infamous. Exactly as they planned, Zhalthar agreed. And there is more. I have been studying human history. The wars they fought on their home world before they reached the stars. The weapons they created. The tactics they developed. And I have concluded something terrible. What? The council leader asked. What they used against us was restrained. Those weapons, those tactics were human military technology, operating under strict rules of engagement. They have worse things. Much worse things. And they chose not to use them. The council chamber was silent. I recommend, Zhalthar continued, that we establish the demilitarized zone as they requested, that we pay the reparations, that we formalize a treaty recognizing their borders as permanent and inviolable, and that we make very, very sure that every Valkorian citizen understands what lives on the other side of that border. You recommend we teach our people to fear humans? I recommend we teach our people to respect the border, to understand that some lines should never be crossed. Not because we are weak, but because crossing that line awakens something that should stay sleeping. The council voted. Unanimously. The treaty was signed. The demilitarized zone established. And throughout Valkorian space the story spread. The story of the fleet that crossed the human border. The fleet that learned why humanity had been so certain in their warnings. Back on Terran Command Station Alpha, Admiral Chen received reports from across the galaxy. 17 species requesting meetings, 8 proposing trade agreements, 3 asking for non-aggression pacts, all of them suddenly very interested in what humanity wanted. It worked, her executive officer said. The battle created exactly the reaction we wanted. Fear mixed with respect. Deterrence without conquest, for now, Chen said. But deterrence requires maintenance. We must continue to be prepared. Continue to develop our capabilities. Continue to make sure that the border means something. You sound like you expect another war. I expect that someone someday will forget this lesson, or will convince themselves that humans were lucky, or that they can succeed where the Valkorians failed. Chen turned from the window. And when that happens, we need to be ready to teach the lesson again. And if something worse comes? The officer asked. Something that threatens not just us, but the entire galaxy? Chen smiled slightly. It was not a warm smile. Then we cross our own border. We unleash the full capabilities we've been holding back. We show the galaxy not just what we use for deterrence, but what we're truly capable of when we stop restraining ourselves. That would terrify everyone. Yes. Which is why we only do it if necessary. If something threatens us all, because humans are at our best when we're defending others, not ourselves.